Hello, class. In this video, I'm going to show you how to draw this drawing I recently created step by step. It's one of these videos where it's less of a tutorial and more just to show you how I put together a holistic drawing in new and interesting ways. Before I get into drawing, I just want to take a few minutes and show how and why I created this. You can see there's actually a lot of lines, simple color schemes, but there's lots of texture to it. There's sort of random line quality to it. What I was trying to accomplish, as I often do, is try to create a distinctly computer drawing while still having a textural feel of a hand drawing. And so I came to this actually through experimentation of another video I did for a lesson. And so if you go back a few videos, I have a series on how I created a script to create these random lines in Illustrator. And actually there's many more than just the ones you see on screen, but the point of that was that beauty really comes from pattern. Now, simple pattern is almost too simple, but too chaotic can also be too chaotic. And in fact, there's a sweet spot between having a pattern but still having a little bit of randomness to it. So these are some of the sweet spot zones I created for this. Now, the sweet spot changes on any number of factors. When you're just dealing with simple lines in Illustrator, it might look like something like this, but if you're dealing with full architecture, it might take on a completely different feel and context and all of that stuff. But I think the overriding principle sort of still maintained. And I was like, well, I wrote these scripts, and maybe I can actually use them for rendering. Like if this does add some interesting texture to the drawing, and I can sort of create this, something that I've always struggled with in computer drawing is adding this richness of pattern without being too simplified. Maybe I can use it for a drawing. So I just quickly, while I was sort of making that video, I created this drawing, which is very simple, which was just a box. And then I used various amount of lines to create a density of random lines to create levels of shade and shadow to create this box. And then I actually just threw a little bit of an atmospheric effect up there. And I was like, oh yeah, this is promising. So I said, let me go and take this to full scale. Let me do a full scale drawing test. And this is sort of where the drawing currently sits. I think it's very successful. It uses about 4 scripts of variations of the same thing, as well as solids. I ended up simplifying the colors a lot to give it this winter feel, adding skiers here to really tell the story that this is a mountain house, maybe it's a retreat in this winter setting. And so I thought it was pretty successful, and I'd share how I generally drew it. So let me jump into that. Now, I already have a new file set up here, and I have a couple things imported already. What we're seeing here is just a JPEG that I exported from SketchUp. So I designed the house in AutoCAD and SketchUp. I have it modeled in SketchUp, and I just, made it so I only see shadows, and I exported that JPEG. I also did just a rough SketchUp export for materials because I'll need to look at the materials in a minute. And so I have those two as reference files. And really, well, the exciting part of this project is the use of random lines and color choices and the composition holistically and all those good things. There is a bit of tedious work to do up front, which is actually tracing out the shapes so I can in vector, because I did this all in Illustrator, so I can use those scripts. All right, and so the first thing that I did is I actually took this. SketchUp doesn't do shade and shadow, but I sort of broke down these materials into shapes to get dark areas and light areas. And so I need to take some time and do that. So I'm going to keep my imports layer here because I'll always use them as reference, but I'm going to set up a layer that I call template. And I'm going to have 2 layers here. So add them, one just for shade. Actually, I'll probably have 3 in the end. Shadow, and actually I will need some material lines as well, which is why I have the other layer here, so I'm going to put that in as well. And essentially all I'm doing is tracing the objects, and designating whether it's shade or shadow. Alright, so the first thing I need to do is actually extract the shadows as vector objects and then really make the shade and the shadows separate so I can give them different densities. And so what I'm actually going to do here is, I think, after having set up the layers, I'm going to come to this file here that was the original image. I'm going to see if I can extract this right from Illustrator. So I want to keep that in my file just in case I need backups of it. So I'm just going to paste this in on top of itself to get a second copy of it. And I'm going to go to Object, Live Trace, Make and Expand. Say OK. And we can see it sort of turned it into a full black and white image there. Pretty good. So I think it's all one group. So let's ungroup it. And I can delete this was just over in pieces of my model. I better turn off these layers so I can see it. That was just some work I had off to the side. And actually I can select everything that's white because I don't want any of the white objects. So let's do same color and delete the white just to make sure there's no white there. And we can see I just have all the shadow now as vector work. So that's good for shadows. Now the thing is I want to make some lighter density where there's shade, and since SketchUp doesn't define that, I'm going to just have to come here and trace out what the shade will look like, and I'll go and make some bright color just so I can see it. And I'm just going to sort of determine where the shade is itself. You know, if the sun's coming here, like the surface of this wall would be in shade, not really shadow. And so, oops, I need to set this to an actual color. Sometimes that happens when you're working like that. It defaults to black and white or grayscale, but no problem. Just click on a swatch or whatever you would like. And now I can just snap along whatever I think the shade is. So it's going to be this surface. Now this surface is going to come down the wall. You can see sort of alignment like that. And up the surface like this. And actually there's a bit of roof there. I'm just totally faking it in because there is a bit of shadow as it sort of casts around like that. So so that's actually just what the shade will be right there. The edge of this is probably in shade as well. You know, as I always say, rendering doesn't have to be perfect, so it's just drawing it to make it look correct. The edge of the stairs would be the same way. The surface on here is a little wonky, I think, but it'll work. I can always adjust this later on too once I see how it all fits together as needed. That's the one nice thing about vector work. Adjust it at any time. And some shade there. This is basically all the edges that are facing this direction is what I'm gunning for. Make this a little bit bigger. There we go. And I estimate, you know, the thing is, of course, I've already done this once, and I spent some time thinking about it the first time around, and so I have that as a reference. You know, there were some spots where I stopped and I really gave it some thought about what I think should be shade and shadow. I think the important lesson is that while there's technically a best answer, there is, you know, no one's really going to know it if you just sort of approximate it. If you just feel comfortable with what you're doing, you're probably going to be right in the end, or make it enough so it's right. The reality is, if you actually look closely at my drawing anyway, the shade and shadow in the sun angle in various spots don't even fully match, because I decided to make decisions as I went based on sort of effect more than reality. So I think that's also okay if it's going to tell the story. You're going to tell the story right, and sometimes that can happen. I'm trying to get this in alignment. There we go. I think this will all come out looking better. It's like hard to see because the white is actually a surface. So right here it looks very strange until I fully render this and get all those surfaces in there. So I think the last bit of shade I need is just down in here. The corner's a little low and I can fix raise it. So you can see what I've done is the red is where I want shade and not shadow. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to take all this shade. Hopefully this next step will work. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to go to the shadow layer and paste it into the shadow layer. Just temporarily I'm going to hide shade, because what I need to do is I need to remove the shade areas from the shadow so that I can specify the density later on. So I have these two zones. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select all of this. I'm going to go to Pathfinder, which I don't think I have up, so let me do that. Pathfinder here, and let me just break everything into the individual shapes, ungroup them, and I can basically delete the areas I have red to remove them from the shadow layer. And I've got a little bits of lines there where there's a little bit of overhang. The reality is that probably won't matter too much because you won't see much of a difference there. And two, if I have a little bit of a line that's slightly darker, so what, it probably only enhances the architecture, the sort of angles and things on this drawing. So I think that's pretty good. I could, again, if I wanted to, if I felt later on you need to go back and clean this up, I certainly could go and do that. That's the great thing about vector work. So we can see I've got shade in red and shadow in black for now. And I might just, for purposes of this drawing, I'm just going to change the shadow to just some weird color because I'm going to do the shadows later on. Oh, there were some things in there that I didn't realize. Is there an object here? I guess it's just the way that it's written. Well, I'll keep it as black. It's fine. Oh, I can figure that out. Ultimately, I'm going to need it as black anyway, so I might as well leave that as is. And you'll see why, because when I get into it, they'll all be layer masks. Okay, so that was sort of quick and easy using SketchUp. There is a more tedious step here that I need to do, which is I need to get the materials. I'm gonna turn off the shade and shadow, and what I really need to get is I need to get all these vertical lines for siding, and I need to get all the horizontal lines for siding. Not too bad. I really just traced them out, and I need to get the brickwork, which actually took me some time to do, so it's possible I'll montage this, but I really did take time and I drew a bunch of these lines. I don't even remember if I can remember the trick I exactly did for the brick. We'll see how it goes, but that does take time, so I might montage this in, and I'm just going to go with a stroke, and I'll set it as a color so I can see it clearly against the various colors I have in my scene. The cyan, that should work. And yeah, I just traced it. Again, I know sometimes there's this thought that computer drawing can save time, and sometimes it can if you already have it modeled, but to make a rendering, it might not be unlike making a hand drawing, and I'm drawing every line just as if I was drawing it by hand. That's what I would have to do. My goal here is not necessarily to save time, but to make a nice drawing. And so let me go through here and drop all these lines. It's very possible what I'm going to do is even just skip ahead a bit on this because you guys want to go see the exciting stuff, which is how I took all this base geometry and turned it into the full rendering, which we are not there yet. So let me go and do that. Alright, so I did just decide to jump ahead and just sort of reuse the work I already did rather than redrawing this boring stuff and boring you. I will just quickly say the way I did the brick originally, I essentially drew a little square. You can see I've got a square shape being highlighted there if you look closely. And then I used the transform tool to copy it all the way across this way, and then I sort of grouped them all. I have them ungrouped now so I could work with them. I grouped them all, but then I used the transform tool with multiple copies, and then did every other row. So I just spaced them out, right? So I just set the settings so I could space them out, so I got that horizontal row every other row, and then I just took that same shape and copied it and moved it over halfway between the brick. Did it all the way across again. You can see I didn't even really worry that much about the corners, and then copied it down the same amount of spacing to fill in the entire bricks. And then I had to do that for each face because each face had a different shaped brick. And so it took some time, but it, again, it could be worth it. So if I turn off the base geometry, we can see that's what I have for a bunch of lines. And that's in all the lines, right? So in the rendering I have, they're not really lines. What they really are, they are base for shadows, and the crevices and cracks are shadows. And so I will go and use the same sort of random line function in all of these as well. But that's sort of my base geometry all set up. If I turn that all on, we can see that's sort of my base geometry. Again, nothing on these layers will actually be there. These are all just templates to set up where I have random lines. And so I guess we might as well get into that now. Okay, so as I go into this shade and shadow stuff, I actually use different techniques for each shade and shadow element. So these are going to be my real layers now, so I'll just make another group, shade and shadow. And I actually have a shadow base in the finalized drawing, a full shadow layer, the building line. I'm going to call it building lines. It's of course the shadows that are caused by the building lines that I already talked about, and then the shade. So I'm going to start with the most simple, which is the base. So I'm just going to come down to my template and select all this black shadow here, and repaste it up on top. And let's see, I'm going to turn it to this dark purple color that I have. I just need to make sure I don't have that white area in there. I only have the black. So if I go to select, actually I should be able to do this. Select same fill color. That'll work. And so I've already pulled my colors out that I used in this drawing. Oops, no, I turned the stroke that. I don't want to do that. I want to do the fill. And I will talk about colors and how I got them in a moment. I know purple is often a good winter color, offsetting the warm yellow sun and all of those things. That's how I started. I can't say I started originally with this exact purple, but I will shortly talk about how I got to the colors that I wanted to get to. So I'm going to select same fill color again, because what I need to do is I need to make this transparent. And I made it about 50% transparent. Of course, we weren't going to see much with the black underneath it at this point in time, but I can turn that off that way now since I have that going here. So I'm going to lock this layer, and I'm going to come up to shadows. And what I'm going to do is, let's see, I gotta run my first script now. So I'm gonna go File, Script, Other Script, and I got some things set up on my desktop. I put them there already. And I did this sky vertical. It's actually something I used for a sky, or I was thinking I was going to use for sky. I ended up using it in the shadows as well. And so we can see it creates these sort of vertical lines. And really, I don't care about, in this case, I don't care about their height and being randomness. So I'm just going to make sure that they're all taller than the building itself in each direction. I'm just going to scale them out. And I'm going to have to use a clipping mask anyway. So this will all be done. We can see it's only so wide, and what I did is I set the color. So I'll go do this now. It's the same dark purple color that I use, but just sort of in stroke form. It has a significant transparency on it though, or opacity I should say. It's like 30%, 20-point thickness I think is what I used. And then I just like copied it over and just sort of filled it in. Yes, so it's not perfectly random. You don't realize that because it is literally the same pattern repeated a few times. But you know what? It's random enough that you don't even realize that that's the case. You can have a little bit of overlap between the two. You don't want too much, but you can see that that's going to give a variation in the textural quality of the shadow itself. So I just filled it all up, right? And then what I need to do is I need to clipping mask this all out. So actually I put it, I ran the script, I actually have to move it. The way this script works, it doesn't put it in the layer you want it to go in, so I just need to select all these objects. I should have done this a bit earlier and just move them into that layer I need to move it into. It's a little tricky here. My screen recording is getting in the way of being able to manipulate my layers easily. I know you guys don't see that, but that's okay. So I want to actually take from here up. I'm gonna have to do this in steps to get this into that shadow layer. See, if I did it just on the first one, I wouldn't have had to do it multiple times. But you know, you live and learn. Shoot, what did I just do? I think I missed that one. Here we go. Almost got them all. Okay, so I got them all into a single layer, the layer I want. And now to use a clipping mask on the whole layer, you need to hit this little circle over here. That activates layer mode, which is going to be able to take this all at the same time rather than each individual object. But then I can go to transparency, make mask, and I can come in here and I'm going to paste. I should have all those black shadows already from my last copy and paste, and I will cut and paste that into here, and we can see what's left over is the shadows here. I got some objects in there I need to get rid of. It looks like I don't need it there, and I think I guess I can delete it from the windows, although I think I ended up just copying over my windows with another layer later on, so it probably doesn't matter to get it out of the window space, but I think it sort of helps the drawing, I guess, read a little bit. So, oops, that's the wrong one. There we go, just like this. And this, I'll come back here. It seems too dark for me now. I don't remember exactly what transparency setting I used. So let me just go and change that down a lot lighter. I must have really had it pretty light. It's hard to tell until I get all the rest of the shadows on here, so I might come back and adjust that later. All right, you know, colors always work good, but you can see it sort of has the shadow, and it's not a holistic, it's not just a simple plain straight color, right? It's got light spots and dark spots, and that's what I really wanted out of this. So we'll lock that layer. We'll go to the materials. And for here, I just did a bunch of random lines in various directions, as I did on several spots throughout this drawing. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to run another script, which is File, Script, Other Script, Desktop Script, and this is just random lines. And you see it creates these black lines over the whole drawing. And I think I made this pretty dense, so I did the same thing. I sort of I should select all of these things again and move them into the right layer, because again, this script doesn't set the layer. That's okay. There we go. Layer management's nice. So I'll do this, and I just copied them and pasted them in, and it sort of puts them in another position. You can wiggle them around, you know, and paste it in maybe a third time. I don't remember how many times I pasted it in, but I think I made this fairly dense. So you can see just by copying it a few times and just moving it slightly, it looks pretty random and pretty dense. Again, if I need to redo it later, I can always do that layer again. Come here, make it the same dark purple color. And I got all these dark purple lines. I'll have to see how dark I made them in the end. We'll come back. I'm gonna have to do the layer clipping mask thing again, but I'm gonna have to use my building lines. So I'm gonna unlock that layer, select it all. I should lock this layer temporarily so we can see. Can you see the gray? That's all the lines I need. That's the only spot these lines need to be. So there's a lot of extra in here, but that's how the drawing works. So I copied that. I can lock it. Come up to all the random lines, hit the dot to get the layer, go to transparency, make mask, go into the mask, paste those objects in and turn them perfectly white. So then when I pop out of the mask and let's say turn that off, we can see I've got a bunch of these lines are pretty clear, but they're not perfect again. They always have these dots. I think I probably made it denser than I did on the last one. So I was smart when I composed the drawing originally, knowing I might want to make it less dense, and I actually made a couple layers for this, and then I could just turn on and like for each copy of the random lines I made an individual layer at first, so then I could just turn off and on the layers or delete the layers that I didn't want. But I didn't do that this time, so they're probably just gonna maintain this density for now. One of the things I see is I think this line stroke in the bricks is thicker than I want it to be, so I can go back in here and select this. How thick is its stroke? How thick is this? Yeah, they're different thicknesses. I can sort of see that, so I can select same stroke weight, and I can actually turn this all down, and this will just render it as less, just like that. So perfect. Pretty good. Again, a little bit dense on the random lines there, but it'll all work out in the end. So I'll go back to transparency to leave the clipping mask mode. You see all those random lines are there, but we only represent a little bit of them. And the final one is the shade. So for the shade, I did a set of random lines, but slightly different. I started with basically a big approximately 45 degree line across my whole drawing here. So I had to start with this shape. And what I did is I created a script. Well, we'll see what the script does here. So script, other script. And I'm not going to show you the scripts because that's a whole other lesson in of itself. Although these are basically variations on most of the scripting, and all of these, even though they do different things visually, they're almost all the same. I think it was shape variation. We can see what it's doing. It's taking that shape I have and just tweaking it slightly. In this case, it's just rotating it slightly, so it's not perfectly 45 degrees anymore. I'm going to make it mostly transparent. I think I did something like 10%. We can see it's going across the lines there. Let's see, where did this put this? I have to organize the layers here. This one happened to put them at the end of the drawing, it looks like. That's no problem. I can select all these objects, move them up to the right layer. You know, one of the reasons for not showing the scripts is I'm not great at scripting, and it's a bit messy, and you can see things like this where the layers aren't appropriate and things like that. But there we go. So I'm gonna unlock the red shade guide, select all of that stuff, and do the same thing I did for the rest of this drawing. Is come back to all these random lines, click the circle, make the layer mask, come into the layer mask, paste that in, and make it white so that only shows where I want it to show. And come back out here and lock the layer, and you can see most of the house is defined at this point in time with 3 different kinds of random lines. I'm going to work probably on the transparencies of some of these as I move forward, as I typically do, but you can see there most of the house is outlined as is, and it's looking pretty good. But there are some obviously lots of other background elements, and even ways that I slightly define the house itself that we'll look at as we move forward. And I carried some of those same scripts into all those things to really unify the drawing. So let's keep moving. So in order to get more of the house definitions, I used the lines from SketchUp, and so I actually have the file opened already. The way I generated this, I won't show you. I just was in SketchUp. I set it just to show lines. I then saved it as an AutoCAD drawing, so a few steps here, and then from AutoCAD drawing I printed it as a PDF, and then I opened that PDF here in Illustrator, so I have vector lines of just the work of all the house. I'm just going to select it all and copy it. I'm going to move it over to my drawing, make a new layer, um, house lines, and paste it in. It's going to come in, of course, sideways into a different scale. Couldn't remember if I changed the scale of this drawing. Compositionally, I probably did later on. So again, it doesn't have to be fully perfect. So I'm going to eyeball this up. In fact, what I might want to do is even turn on one of my base layers to make sure I have it perfectly in line. But we'll see how it goes here. Actually, I got pretty good just by little large. I should have done this sooner, because this would have really helped me set up some of those shade lines I was struggling with a few minutes ago. But it's looking like I'm getting pretty close here just by changing the scale and moving it into place as needed. I might just drop on this layer just so I can see clearly. Pretty good there. It's a little big, tiny bit large. Yeah, that's pretty good. I'm going to go with that as good enough. Okay, so then what I did is I just set the color from black. I just used the same deep purple color I'm using, and I set the line weight. I think I set it to 0.5, so fairly thin. But then what I did is, once I got the lines, we can see the lines enhanced. I can really read the architecture. I did a house outline line as well to give the whole thing a bit more weight. And I used the same color. I just did the stroke at, I think, 1.5 point. And for that one, I just had to trace it around with my pen tool. So I'm going to just turn off the shade and shadow so I can just clearly see this. And I traced around, again, just the profile of the house. Just like this. And, you know, it takes a few minutes, but not too bad to do. And sometimes just taking time to draw. I often find it just relaxing, just to do some clicks. If it takes a few minutes, I'm perfectly comfortable. Obviously, like an hour's worth of work might get annoying, and I apologize if this particular step is a little boring. We will get through it. And then I have to come, that's the outline. This is actually a hole in here as well through this little deck, so I gotta highlight that as well as part of the profile line. Just like that. So we can see the lines of the house just as they are, and then I can add the shade and shadows back on, and I have that as my house rendering. Now, the other thing I did with the house, once I got the profile line, this would really help, is I added a slight fade edge, really subtle around the whole thing, just again to enhance the shade and shadow quality. And so I'm going to actually uncheck the profile edge I have here and select both of these shapes. And I'm going to put this down at a lower layer. I'm going to call it house fill, and paste this in. And I'm actually going to make it all white. I'm going to use the color right now because I'm going to go to Object, Clipping Mask, Make. Oops, I always get that backwards. Object, Compound Path, Make. There we go. So just cut out that hole. I'm actually going to make the whole layer white. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Effects, Stylize, Inner Glow. And I'm going to set the inner glow to the deep purple. And I'm going to give it a big blur. This is what I gave it. It already remembers when I did this 30 point preview. And I'm going to give it this look. Now, the thing I'm going to do is that's obviously way too dark. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the opacity and put that way down. Something like, around 20. Like this. So very subtle. I'll lock the layer. but if you can see if I turn it on and off, you can notice the difference. When it's in the finalized rendering, you almost don't notice at all. It becomes almost just like a little bit of light reflecting, a little bit of shade, shadow, sort of cast across the building, adds a soft quality to it, and works pretty nice. So we've done that. The last thing I did on the house itself then was just rendering the windows a little bit. All right, so I realized that you can see I added these blue windows here. I put that on my template layer. I just traced out where the glass would be. I did that off camera because it's boring. Essentially, to do the glass, I had to do the same thing I did for this shade and shadow. So I needed to create a template for myself so I could use as a layer mask later on. So I did that off screen. And what I'm going to do is I can come up and do this anywhere. I'm going to do it above the shade and shadow, I think. I'll call it Windows. And I'm going to start by running a script here. Let's see, File, Script, other script. And I did this sky vertical, so yes, I gotta actually come up to this layer. File, script. There's my layers and scripts things coming back again, as usual. So I'm doing sky vertical because really the windows often reflect the surrounding or reflect the sky. That's exactly what I was thinking when I wrote this script the first time. So I ended up reverse using it for the shadows as well, but I actually did the windows first originally, and that's how I created the script. I did them vertically, and then I just rotated them like this, and I think I ended up stretching it out a bit because I wanted, in this case, I wanted to get some of this sort of crinkly edge and the overlapping lines there. So what I did is I just put them in. That's too, you know, I might not have stretched it out much. I might have ended up doing something like this. You know, we'll see how it looks. I can shift it to wherever I need it to go. I ended up changing the color a bit. Again, I'll get to the color choices later on. Yeah, okay, so sort of this almost grayish color. And then I just copied these over again to hit the other windows. So I can sort of copy them again that way. And I might have just stretched those out for simplifying purposes. Just like this, move them out this way. So there we go. So that set up all the lines. I think I probably changed the transparency on these guys to something like 40%. Yeah, a little bit lighter. There we go. Actually, I guess when I brought it in, I did a almost random transparency setting on them. I don't think I ended up using them. You can always play with transparency however you need it. So anyway, I got the basic shapes outlined like before. I'm going to temporarily lock this layer. Actually, I'll put this layer into the window layer. There we go. I can lock it. I'm going to unlock my glass template layer, select it all, copy it, turn it off, and come back into this Windows. Hit the circle so I can get the layer, make mask, paste it in on top, set the color to white, and we can see I'm left with sort of the streaky blue color for the windows, using a bit of randomness. So the color variation is random, the length of lines are a bit random, just to give it that little bit of textural quality that's often hard to do with computer drawings. So I can then lock my window layer, and that essentially finishes the house, and I can move on to the rest of the landscaping and other elements. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is the mountains in the background of this image, and work on really much the background. So the template and all that stuff, that can stay at the very bottom, the imports. Hopefully I won't need those again since I'm done with the house, but I'm going to do mountains, and it actually took several layers, so this is going to be just the mountain base, the basic shape of these. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to select a color, which is this color green, and I will this is how I drew the mountains originally, as a very sort of this color green we see on here. I ended toning the color way down in the end, but this is the point where I actually started to think about my colors. So I just want to jump over here really quick and show you this template. You can see that over here I have this set up as a deep purple I've been using, and the green that I'm now about to use is set right here. I put those two colors in as my input colors. That set the whole color scheme for this. Now I have a video on this color wheel that I created using another script, and a set of videos that talk about color theory and how I think about colors as patterns in order to select colors. But you can see all the rest of the colors came from here that we'll see. I'm not going to jump back to this, I'm just showing you, but there's the deep purple and the green I set up. I have some variations of green here and some variations of purple I'm going to use. The ice blue I just used was basically from there. And I used some maroon and pink colors that came from these zones as well throughout the drawings. And I did at some point have some of these more yellow colors in it, as we can set up. In the end, I ended up not using that color at all in the end. So I sort of came over here and used some of these maroon colors. So you've got, you know, a pattern of here and here and here. Or sorry, here and here are symmetrical about the deep blue, and then the opposite, the contrasting color, in this case of green, is basically what I ended up using. If you're interested in sort of those colors and how I came to this, you can go and watch those other videos, but I do find that tool very useful. In the end, when I'm over here, we can see I've got the colors already just pulled over into here, already set up for myself. I just copied and pasted the colors in and then put them in my swatches to begin to use them. So the first step, of course, is to draw the mountains, and I started by drawing them off to the side, and there, you know, I was just sort of coming up, and actually I think I just ended up sort of using rough lines. We'll see if this works here. It's sort of coming up pretty tall, maybe coming down like that, and I just filled the whole screen. I'll block a lot of this out a bit later. And then I think I went to Effects, Stylized, Round Corners, and I just, you know, I think I used the high round corners to get it, you know, to get the smooth mountain line just like that. And then I did sort of one in the distance as well, same thing. I could put it on a different layer if I wanted to, but put it here. And actually what I ended up having to do is I ended up having to sort of follow the same line here, just because of the way I set up the layers. And I'm going to set this across. Now things in the distance, they end up being lighter and more faded, and so for now, because I know again it didn't necessarily do this right in the first go, but I do know I use this sort of light purple color compared to the dark purple color I have there. I'm just going to arrange my layers and send that to back, so I've got the green one on top of the purple one. And just as I go, because I like to clean things up. Obviously, I'm going to clean up. I often will make a layer at the very top. I call it my gray out. It's just sort of a quick way of cheating. I use my eyedropper, get the standard gray of Illustrator, and I just fill in gray boxes to block off all things that end up hanging off the drawing. Just a quick way, just for visual purposes. You know, if you got to export this or do other things with it, you might need to actually clip these things down. There's various ways of doing that, but for visually, I just like to say, okay, this is what my screen's going to be. So there's the mountains. Oh, you know, I forgot I have to make this round corners. So Effects, apply round corners. There we go. Got the mountain in the background there. And why don't I just start to white out some of these things in the drawing that I need to do. So I guess what I'll do is I already have house fill. I'm gonna almost need to come to this guy, go to the appearance. Let's see, will I be able to do this? You know what, I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna copy this whole layer and make a new layer. I could probably put it all in there, but call it house fill 2. Paste it right on top. I just need to get rid of all those extra things and turn up the opacity now. right? So I'm just blocking it out, what's going on behind there. That way, and I'm going to add a ground plane as well to start blocking out the lower part of the mountain. Oops, frown, I gotta spell that right. And I basically used white, and I sort of did the same thing. It's almost like a mini mountain, you know, in the foreground. So do that, and we'll go effects, apply around corners again. So you get sort of a snowdrift, some light topography in the foreground, just like that. All right, so obviously I did a lot more mountain work on here. That's just the base and how I got the color started. What I ended up doing for the rest of my mountain base is I actually came in and I did effects, stylized inner glow, and I used my light purple color, and I did 100-point blur, and I just blurred it like this just to reinforce the edge, and we're going to see how this changes here in a second. And I went to appearances, and what I did is I just took the opacity of the fill and turned that way down to approximately 30. We can see it just sort of just gave it a light purple tone there, and I turned the whole opacity down pretty low as well, I think to like 40, to make it light. Now the thing is, we're reading this back mountain, it's almost blocking that foreground mountain. Actually, I have so much opacity on it, but I ended up basically doing the same thing. So I went into just the opacity itself here and turned that down. I think I used a different number. I don't know, I'll go with 40. You can start to see the foreground mountain as I do this here. And I went and I applied the same inner glow to it. But the inner glow again should be outside the fill. So you can see the edge, even though it's the same color, because it's a different opacity, because I'm playing with opacity in different spots, you can see it slightly darkens it a little bit. But I do want to also turn this down a lot more too. So just like this. So there we go. So you can start to see there's a bit of green down here, slightly purpley darker edge, and just a light purple for the back mountain with a very, very light darkening of the edge. It's very subtle in these colors, but it's the base on which I drop the rest of the line work for the mountains, where again, to tie the drawing all together, I end up using sort of a random lines and sort of a different way, but enough to tie the mountains together with the house. Alright, so I'm going to make 2 more layers for the background mountains. One for the far mountain, and the other one for the, I don't know, other mountain, I'll just call it mountain. I'm actually going to start with the far mountain thing here, and I'm actually going to have to come up to the top layer because I need to run my script, which requires me to be at a layer at the very top. And I'm going to go File. I'm going to use the same script I use, that sort of really random script that I use for the lines and things on my house. So this is random line script here. There we go. And just cut them out of that layer and put them in my far mountain layer. And I'm going to set the color to my light purple color. This, I'm going to move them up a bit. I think I used the original density for this. Something like that. Okay. That should be good. And what I did is I'm going to have to lock this temporarily. I'm going to unlock my base mountain and get that background mountain as an object and just copy it into my clipboard. I'm going to come into my far mountain so I can select everything. I hit the little circle, go to transparency, make mask, come over to the mask, and paste that mountain shape in. Paste it into place. There we go. Now what I did here is I went to swatches and I loaded in some of these horizontal lines that you can get from your standard lines. I meant to make the fill sort of the horizontal line. So I just took a standard one from Illustrator that comes with it, and I have to actually go to my appearances and set all this stuff back up to like 100% and take out the inner glow and do all that stuff from that layer. And when I do that, you can see I've got sort of this stripe random lines coming through this. Now, one thing I did is I ended up rotating it from horizontal to vertical. So to do that, I need to go to my rotate tool, and I have to hold the tilde key down on my keyboard. Oops, I'm in the wrong spot here. There we go. So rotate tool, hold tilde down, and then hold shift to go vertical. And you can see I've made these very subtle vertical lines going through my drawings here. Get that going on. Let's see, that looks good. And then I'm going to come back out, and I'm going to go to my layers, and I'm going to lock that, and I'm going to go to my top layer. I'm going to do the same random script. Get a new set of random lines. So it's denser on the mountains that are in the foreground. I'm going to let the random lines from the background also bleed through to the foreground, but I'm going to double up the amount of lines essentially here for this slightly foreground mountain to make them darker. So I will do this. I made them the same sort of light version color of purple as well, since they're in the distance. And I sort of have to lock the layer temporarily, come and grab the base shape of the mountain, hit the little circle to select everything, make layer mask, come in, paste that in. I have to change the foreground to this same set of lines, take off all the opacity and inner glow. Go, and then rotate it up. And shape. And I think, you know what, yeah, you know what, I also hit the invert mask button to make them darker. That's reversing the black and white quality of the shape I grabbed from Illustrator. Now I want to come back through and go back to the outside of these guys. And what I actually did is I adjusted the stroke. I actually made them semi-thick. I think I made them like 1.3. And transparency, I don't remember now. I'm just going to pull it down to semi-be random. Could probably make it more transparent than that. Let's try about 35. That's not so bad. I could potentially make them thinner, but I got to go make that adjustment to the background mount. So I'm going to select it all here. I'm going to invert the layer mask just to get the lines a little more reading strong, almost too strong, but I can then come through and adjust them as needed. So since they're pretty far back, I might even make them even lighter. So, you know, I always tweak things as I go. I could check my original drawing to see how the transparencies were set and things of that nature. I think it's a little bit lighter. But you can always go and do this at the end. But nonetheless, we've got mountains. We can tweak them further on as we need to go. We can see there's sort of this random line quality that's really pulling in the textural quality of this. It almost does make it look like there's some snow or trees and things like that in the distance. I think these both are still to make the transparency way down a bit more. I can make them the same. There we go. That's probably getting closer to what I had. So we'll go there. Again, I can always play with this later. Again, until I get everything else in, it doesn't much matter anyway. Now the last bit of background, well, I shouldn't say I sort of considered it far in the mountains, but they're really background trees. They're not the full trees. I will do those later, but I sort of think of them as the base of the mountain. Maybe they're trees. It's hard to say. Is another random script here. So I'm going to go File. I'm going to go to my top layer. I'm going to go to Script, Other Script, and I use this Random Lines Vertical script, which is produces this shape right here. I'm going to make this my dark purple stroke color. And I will also make these like the same thickness, 1.3. Okay, that's good. And I'm going to pull these down here, and I'm going to make them a lot taller. I could, let's see, I think I sort of like made them wider as well. They'll almost start to line up with these lines that I used in the background to a certain degree. And then once I sort of got it, I just copied over and over again this sort of same pattern, this random pattern that was created next to each other. And then there's really none behind the house, so I can select this whole bit of it and copy it over to this side. Like this. Maybe I'll just stretch this out just a little bit to fill the space. And I will cut those out of my top layer, put them where they belong in the layer order so they get blocked out as needed. And that sort of sets sort of these distant trees in the background, again with a random script, so I didn't have to draw a bunch of random height lines. They just sort of came in. I think what I actually ended up doing on this, now that I look at what I've drawn here, is I'm actually going to shrink this back down this way, because I think there's too much variation at the top. I know they're not tall enough now, but what I'll do is I'll come in with my white arrow, just select the bottoms of these things and pull them straight down, so I can get it to look like that. See? So there we go. That's the background there. And although I didn't draw it next originally, just to sort of finish up the background elements, I think I might go and do the sky. Alright, so you might see a slight change in the drawing. My drawing crashed because I had a lot open and trying to record and things like that. Usually I'll save quite frequently, so if it crashes, it doesn't matter. But what I actually ended up doing is I just took my original drawing, which I'm recreating in this video, and just took the pieces I've already drawn. And so since there is some randomness, non-exactness, the drawing is probably slightly different than when you just sort of glitched back in, but I can continue to draw as is from this point forward and continue to work on my sky. So the sky is composed of several layers as well. So I'm going to make just a group for the sky, and I have sort of this pink color in the sky, and I have to actually block out some of the mountains again, so block out, we'll need that. And then I have sort of a blue edge, and then I've got some clouds on that. I think are the 4 layers that I used for the sky, and we'll see how they go. So the nice thing is sort of this pink sky that I created in here, and I did this the same way. I used the same script that I used for the reflections on the windows, since that is supposed to be like the sky, but I did end up changing the color on it and doing a few things to it. But the first step is to go up to my script layer and run a new script, which is the same one that I used for the windows, but I'm going to rerun it here. Sky verticals, here we go. Cut them out of that layer, put them down here, and again I did turn them horizontal in this case, and I basically had them from just off the top of the mountain and I just sort of stretch them out across something like this. Now, what I did here is, because I wanted to give it this gradient across the whole thing, and so I need to make these actual fills, not strokes. So I'm going to go to Object, I'm going to go to Expand, and say OK. And then I have to ungroup this so that they become sort of fills instead. And what I did is, again, I went and grabbed my colors from the color wheel that I showed earlier, but I went to this sort of pinkish color to white like this. And this allows me to go to the gradient tool and sort of, holistically give it a gradient. I actually want to go, I think, this direction is how I did it. So it sort of fades out at an angle holistically like that. And what I want to do is give it all transparency as well, so they start to have some overlap. There we go, like that. So you can see this like slight pink edge to it that sort of fades out almost into nothingness. It really sort of gives an edge or ceiling to this mountain and helps the background. All right, so of course I can lock that layer. The reason why I have this layer is because it's overlapping the mountains, and I thought that the easiest way to do this was just to go to my mountain base layer, select that object, paste it in here. I'm gonna have to change the color to white and take off all the effects and things on it again. So no inner glow, opacity should be fully up just to make it perfectly white like this, and see it blocks out the sky. That's all that layer is meant to do there. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add sort of a bluish tint to the sky as well. Obviously there should be some blue in it because I have some in the windows. And so I'm going to take this same layer, the same white object, probably do it, well, no, I'm going to do it this way because I need different transparency. So I'm just going to paste it on top, right? And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to Effects, Stylize, I'm going to go to Outer Glow. And I'm going to set my color to the ice blue, the light blue color. So let me go and grab that color code. Might have to set it here just temporarily so I can copy and paste the hex number, select Control C and set it back to white temporarily. So Effects, Stylize, Outer Glow, because now I can click in here and just shoot. I just misplaced. I have to do that again. Darn it. Darn it, darn it, darn it. I just missed Control C and I just recopied something I didn't want to. But it's okay. You know, again, when I drew this originally, I made lots of changes and errors all along the way, and that is okay. There we go. And 40 pixels, I think. So we can see it gives the whole mountains that sort of glow. It's too dark right now, so I want to take the whole opacity down. Probably somewhere around there, 2/3 approximately. It's a very, very subtle blue color around the top of the mountain, defines the mountains a little bit, just like that. And then what I did is I did these clouds. I did the clouds sort of in an interesting way, very abstract. I went to a pure white. I went to this box. I just drew a box around here like this, right? So it blocked out the blue, but then I went and used the scribble effect, which is sort of almost like using the random stuff, but I went to here and I just set a bunch of these numbers. 0.7. I left some of these pretty standard. I didn't want any curviness in it. This, and then I did Gaussian blur on it. color, and I did it pretty high. I did like 11. Sort of fade that out as like clouds like that, and we'll lock that, and that's sort of how I came up with the sky. I think the blue is still too dark, and actually I think the pink might be a bit dark too, so I could come back and play with the transparencies as needed. I'm gonna change the transparent. Somewhere around there. Anyway, draw it as you like. So it has some blue tones, some pink tones, and fades in all directions, some white, some blur out. Again, I really like how it sort of caps the mountain top like that. So that was how I did the sky. Let's move on and continue to do things like, I don't know, we'll do the trees. Trees seem like a good thing to do next. Alright, so to do the trees, I'm going to make a new layer in front of my mountains. In fact, in front of the ground. I'm going to start with the background trees more than the foreground. I mean, these are still not mid-ground trees, I should call them mid-ground trees. So I'll call a layer trees there. I'm actually going to set my fill to no color. I'm going to set my stroke to this deep purple color. And what I did is I just took a line and I clicked, where I thought it would look good in here and made it, as tall as I wanted to make it. And I made it pretty thick of a line stroke. Say something like 7, but what I went down is I went down to profile and I went to this sort of triangle shape, just so it's thicker at the bottom and thin at the top. Right, so I did a few of those in the background here. Just like that. They're all the sort of same shape, and I added 3 of them like that, and then I added a branch to sort of each one, sort of very similarly. I just came through with my line, I just made it thinner. I kept it at one point, but I used the same triangle shape, so you can see just sort of offshooting like that, bit of a little abstraction, but it looks good for the background, doesn't want to overwhelm the drawing. Okay, and you can play around with it. I certainly moved them around and did other things, and I might continue to do that as I sort of go along. And that was simply how I did the mid-ground trees. And then for the foreground trees, I just drew them in. So I had to go all the way to near the top because they're going to block out a lot of things at the top. So I'll call these trunks because we only see part of the trees. Sort of, again, they're very much abstracted in a way, just to give a sense of depth. But I'm going to use fill of the same dark purple color, and I'm going to start down here on this one and sort of come up just past the edge of this tree. And I'm going to come way off the top. Doesn't matter, and then sort of almost make it symmetrical ish coming down here like that. Doesn't have to be perfect because it is a tree. And I think I'll probably run a little bit of round corners on this. Not too much, I don't think. 10 points probably too much, but I'll try 5. We'll see how that looks. Like that. I can adjust the points. It's a little crooked, so I'll zoom in, sort of adjust the points as needed. Something like that. It's not a bad tree. And then the one over here is almost all cut out of the drawing. So I can just start somewhere on the top, make it wider on the bottom, come across like that and fill that in, and it gives a very much the sense of depth. I think what I did on this tree trunk, I even played with the color a little bit. I made it a little bit darker to reinforce that as the foreground color, just like that, just slightly darker, and that even helps a lot. So there's the sort of foreground trees. Again, just simply drew that in. It's okay when you're computer drawing. Just simply drawing sometimes can go very quick, and you can add these things, and it works great. And that works great. In fact, next element, I'm going to do the same thing. What I ended up doing also is I end up adding a path to the drawing to get to the house. I'm going to call it path. And could I have modeled it or do it any number of ways? I could have. I just went. I made a layer. I used the same dark purple color and used my pen tool, and I clicked on the drawing, and I sort of clicked out here and drew a curve and drew it out to approximate the perspective, just like that. And then I did the other side of the path, sort of matching approximately the shape and trying to match the perspective as best I could, just like this. And of course, once I do it, that's not too bad, but I'll probably, adjust the points a little bit to get it to look better, to match a little bit better in this angle here, and probably a little more wider on the perspective, and something like that looks pretty good. I can soften this curve out a little bit, go back and forth. That when I drew it originally, I probably spent a little more time adjusting the lines than I'm going to do in this video, but that is okay. I don't want to waste too much time doing it, but you can just see how it just draw it and just tweak it a little bit, and you can get a nice little path in there just like that. And then finally, I'll just keep going with some of these foreground elements, and I'm going to add the people in that I had, the skiers. And so to do that, what I actually did is I found some silhouettes of skiers online, and I'm going to start by pasting those in. Let's make a new layer. Skiers. Again, the skiers that I have in the drawing, they're really meant to tell the story. This is a place for them. This is a winter activity. It reinforces the snow, reinforces why this building is here, and they're subtle, but it sort of works. So I'm going to go File, and I'm going to go to Place. So again, I had already taken some skiers in from before that I found online. I think I actually ended up using this image here. Yeah, let's see. I'm going to put this one in and see how it looks. What I did is I put the image in, just sort of off to wherever, off to the side, and I just traced out the people. That's not the one I used. Let's see if I can find. I mean, these would work too. I mean, the same thing. I found a picture. I traced them out as an object. Let's see. All right, this is what I remember now doing for the skiers. I did find images of skiers. I traced them out. I sort of silhouetted them. I had two here, and once I had this silhouetted, I could select just the individual object from Photoshop. I think I just copied it, and I went to my drawing. And pasted the object in. I can do this off to the side or wherever I need to do it. I need to run that live trace command to make them vector. So I can make and expand, and I can get rid of I have to ungroup it first. Get rid of the white areas. This, and then I have a silhouette. I'm going to have to do this probably in a couple layers, and I do want to put them behind the trunk here. So I put this here. Remember, the eyes of a person is going to be about the height of the vanishing point, which I know because I set up the drawing is approximately here horizontally. And so there's probably some topography on this ground, so I can go a little higher because clearly there's a mountain here that's coming downwards. So I can play with that a little bit, but I basically want to put the person about there. So just right now I'm working with the silhouettes, and I'm going to come to the other one, select the other one, copy it in, go to my drawing, paste the silhouette in, live trace it, ungroup it, delete the white parts. There you go. Put them sort of in the foreground area as as needed, just like that. So I sort of set it up something like this, and then what I'm going to need to do, because I'm going to use these as clipping masks again. Actually, I'm going to set them. Why don't I do this? Because I think I did it this way. I'm going to set them as white. Now they're going to almost fade out, but I'm going to have to block them out. I'm going to have to keep them there to block out what's behind it, just like I did in other ways. So I'll call that skier layer 1, and I'm going to come up and make a new layer and call it skier lines. Actually, I know what I did to make this read. I'm going to actually go back to these silhouettes so I can see them. I'm going to give them a stroke because I know I did that in the original. I gave them actually a stroke of this deeper maroon color, just like that, which I got from the color guide that I showed earlier. And the reason why I chose maroon in the end, because I wanted it to be almost like everything else is always there. The trees are always there, buildings are always there, mountains are always there, but the skiers are moving, right? So by changing the color, I gave the sense of movement in a way, and they're just temporary there for the image. Set them apart as something different. It actually fades them away a little bit, hides them a little bit more. I thought it worked out well. So that's why I did it. I experimented with the colors from that color wheel, and that's what I settled on. So anyway, we'll do that there. I'm going to go up to actually my line I need for my scripts, because I have to run a script again. Just did the random lines. There, and I got a lot in here now, but I just got to move them over the skiers just like this, and I set them to that same sort of maroony red color like that. Let's move that stuff into the correct layer. Take my figure silhouettes here and here, copy them out. I'm going to keep that layer. I'm going to come up to all the lines, hit the circle to select them all, make mask, come in here, paste it in just like that, and I've got the random skier lines there. Come back to my regular layer and I can lock it, and I've got the skiers. I think the line weights are too thick, so let me go and try to take those strokes down a bit. I should see what I use. We'll go with 0.5 for now. That looks good. Might go change this similarly. There we go. Just fade them out a bit. There we go again. I might actually just add a few more lines just by duplicating the lines a little bit. Yeah, there we go. There's a nice density there. So I just duplicated the random lines to make them a little darker. The benefits of being in vector work, just like that. And so, so that's all the elements are on the screen now. The last bit of work that I really need to do is actually add shadow, just draw them in for all the extra elements, that is the skiers and the trees and things like that, and we're nearly done. Alright, so to do the shadows, I actually just used the same shadow layer I did for the building. And so what I need to do is, well, I'll temporarily make a new layer. I can just call it layer 50 for now, and I'll just use black because I'm going to create that template that will become the layer mask. And same thing as I've done, I can put this over here so we can see it. You know, when I just need something, I just draw it as needed, and that's what I did for the shadows. So I came in and said, okay, well, this tree shadow is going to cast a shadow almost horizontally, because that is what the sunlight is coming from that way. This tree shadow is probably outside the screen. These little trees, you know, I could probably just use a stroke color, something like that. Be very thin, probably make it a little bit bigger. Then I'll make it 2 points, just like that. And I can probably just copy this line for the other two shadows over here, right? Just like this. Of course, we'll actually, we don't want them to overrun the house. That might be problematic, so we'll just pull them back to the edge of the house in both cases. I'll leave them behind the skiers because that won't matter. Plus, if you want to adjust them later on, you can go ahead and do that. And then the other shadow I need to do is get for the skiers. And what I did for that is I did like a regular trick I'll often do in Photoshop, since I had the silhouettes in Photoshop. And I think I only did it once because it's so faint, I almost cheated. But I'm going to copy that one skier and paste it in so it makes a new layer. And I went to, oops, sorry, didn't realize I didn't have full screen here. I went to edit, transform, distort, which is a good way to make a shadow because you just pull it like that and you can sort of get it in the direction you need to get. It's just so it's sort of an approximate shape. I think I ended up rotating it a bit too because of the shadow. Sometimes too horizontal makes it difficult, but I'll just copy that whole layer. So I should make it black. I keep doing that, keep jumping to the wrong thing here. So edit, fill, black, copy it, come into Illustrator, paste that in, here, and it can come off. And I think I literally used the same one for this other skier, even though they're not identical. By the time I was done, I was like, oh, it doesn't even matter. If you wanted to go, you could do the same thing for the other skier, but you can see it's going to look good enough, especially by the time we get it done in here. And so I'm going to select all of this stuff here. This is going to be problematic, I think. Well, I might just use it. What I'll do is, you know what I'm going to do? Is because these are ultimately going to have to be white. So let me just trace out the silhouettes of those shadows really quick in white. Again, the shadows don't have to be perfect. They're just trying to get a sense of angle and shape. Again, when in doubt, just draw it out. Oh, I like that. So that's going to be white. And again, I can use the same one for this shadow. So I can delete these guys. I'm going to need it to be white again because of the way that I have to use the clipping mask. So I'm going to have to go off the screen. I think that might be good enough here. So we'll do that as white. We'll select these lines and make them white as well. And get this guy, get white as well. Okay, so I got all these white shapes in here. I'm just going to select them all and copy them. In theory, I don't need that layer anymore. And I'm going to unlock my shadow layer, hit the 3 dots. Okay, and come into my layer mask, paste those shapes in. Let's see, how did I do this? Oh, let's see. I actually had it. Oh, I had it backwards. I did have it as black. Well, that would have been easier, but I can do this. Set these back to black. My apologies. They should be black. We can see the shadows come through. And the lines back here need to be set to black. These shadows will come through. Now, a couple notes about these shadows. One thing I did here is I added a lot of blur to these guys. Select blur, Gaussian blur. That might be too much. Actually, no. I added a lot of blur. I did something like that to it, where it really blurred them out to again give them movement, almost icy, sort of a cool effect like that. Then I went back to regular mode. Oh, the thing I want to point out is if you don't have objects here when you put the clipping mask in, you might not see anything happen there. It's because you might not have your random lines there, because what you might have to do is just select them. You can hardly see them, but when you select them, you can see that they're there, and then copy them to wherever they need to be. Try that again. So I can add them there and they increase the shadows, right? So I know I copied this earlier, and you can see how many of those lines for the shadows are there. If you don't have many at that point, that's all I did to cover the shadows areas as needed. And with that, that's pretty much the end of this drawing. Again, did I get it all this quickly the first time? No, I experimented with color, experimented with tree positions and things like that, but ultimately I knew I wanted to use those random lines in various ways to create this textural quality I think was successful. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I encourage you to continue to experiment in your own drawing. Thanks for watching.